Optimal health for high performers. This is the Health Upgrade Podcast with Dr. Nawaz Habib.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Health Upgrade Podcast. And to say that I'm excited about today's guest is kind of an understatement. I have been a fan of Dr. Darshan Shah for a very, very long time. Everything that he's done with Next Health has been at the forefront of what I've wanted to share with regards to what health really looks like for my patients and for my clients. And so I'm very, very honored to have you here, along with our co-host, JP.
Thank you.
This episode of the Health Upgrade Podcast is brought to you by Truvaga. Have you been looking for a simple way to feel calmer, think clearer, and sleep better? Imagine achieving this with just 2 minutes a day. I'm excited to introduce you to Truvaga, a handheld device that supports your nervous system through gentle vagus nerve stimulation. As a doctor specializing in functional health and wellness, I've seen firsthand how Truvaga has accelerated healing in my clients. I've used this device to help people with a range of issues, from sleep disturbances and heart palpitations to digestive dysfunction, nervous system imbalances, and mental wellness concerns. The results have honestly been remarkable. Truvaga is designed to catalyze and accelerate the shift in your body from fight or flight to rest, digest, and recover mode, helping you manage stress, maintain mental clarity, and unwind more easily. It's not just theory. I've witnessed its positive impact on real people facing real health challenges. The best part? Truvaga fits seamlessly into your routine. No need to carve out hours for wellness. Just 2 minutes a day can make a difference. It's a small investment of time for potentially significant benefits in how you feel and function each day. If you're curious to experience Truvaga for yourself, visit truvaga.com/upgrade. You can save $30 on your device by using the code UPGRADE30 at checkout. Remember, that's truvaga.com, truvaga.com/upgrade. It might just be the first step towards a calmer, clearer you, just as it has been for many of my clients. So, Dr. Shah, you've obviously created a very, very positive brand and a very important piece, I think, to understanding what longevity is and how we can move towards optimizing health span for a lot of our patients. But a lot of people probably don't know your story. And I'd love to get started a little bit backwards, kind of back up to when you were a surgeon, your time working in the ER and OR, and getting into what changed in your life that then promoted you to start up Next Health.
Yes. So, Nawaz, thank you, first of all, so much for having me. And JP, I really appreciate you getting me on your podcast. I love speaking about everything about health and longevity. And so this is the perfect podcast for that. And I'm also a big fan of everything that you talk about. I had you on the podcast and talking about the vagus nerve, and JP, your device. Like it's a really integral part of what we want to offer our patients. And so the story starts obviously like when I became a surgeon and typically trained in the Western medical environment where, it was incredible training. I trained at the Mayo Clinic. I learned how to be a surgeon. We did some of the most intricate, delicate, and complex surgeries you can imagine. I started my career after my training doing trauma surgery, which, as you know, being in medicine, it is probably one of the most complicated and difficult things that you can do, not just from a psychological perspective, but also from just everything that you have to know. Because not only did we take care of the patient when they got hit by a bus or whatever happened to them, we took care of them in the ICU. So you're managing their ventilator, you're managing their pressors, you're managing everything about this person to keep them alive, right? And so I grew up with that mindset, like, how do I keep people alive using the medicines and the surgeries that we have available? I loved it for many, many years because, thank God we have Western medicine. If you get hit by a bus, you get diagnosed with cancer. I did a lot of cancer reconstruction. If you get a heart attack, I did a lot of revascularization procedures of the heart. Thank God that's there. But as I was practicing, I realized more and more through my own health struggles that this system was built to take care of emergencies and disasters It was never built to keep us healthy or to deal with chronic disease, right? What we had was a hammer and the whole world became a nail. We had medicines and pharmaceuticals and surgeries and hospitals and an entire financial system of insurance and PBMs and all this stuff built for that. It was never meant to handle chronic disease, because the way we should be handling chronic disease is turning it around and reversing it, not addressing the symptoms with pills and pharmaceuticals and surgeries. And so I became a victim of that same mindset. Okay. So I was in the operating room 12 hours a day, sometimes even overnight. I was operating 5, 6, 7 days a week. I then became an entrepreneur and opened surgery centers. Now I have to start paying bills and managing employees, et cetera. And I became a stressed out disaster who could not sleep, who could not manage stress, became depressed, became very overweight, but worse than that, metabolic syndrome, like every checkbox of metabolic syndrome, visceral fat, hypertension, lots of other issues that come with metabolic syndromes, all the comorbid diseases, autoimmune disease. I had everything. And I quickly found out that this system that was built to keep us alive was not meant to reverse any of this, because I went and saw my doctor who just gave me a giant handful of pills, right? And so I decided at that point in time that I needed to turn my entire mentality around and do something different. I went out there and learned nutrition. I had an inkling that nutrition might be the key here. And it's so crazy. Like, I'm a doctor and I just had a little inkling. Like, maybe there's something about this nutrition thing that I need to fix. So I went out and learned nutrition. I went out and learned how to exercise. I actually got my personal trainer certification, a nutrition degree. And then I heard through some of these conferences I was going to about this new field that was developing called functional medicine. And this was like kind of, the nutrition and the exercise training, but on a medical level, on how to treat everything that was going on inside of me at the root cause. And that's what really was an aha moment for me. And like 8 months, completely turned everything around. No more metabolic syndrome, got off almost all my medications, got down to one high blood pressure medication, even stopped taking cholesterol medication, which is a genetic problem in my family. And so I thought to myself at that point, like, this is the key. This is the key to unburdening our Western medical system from the burden of chronic disease management, because it should not be doing that. It's what's created this massive financial and mindset disaster in our country, that all of us have outsourced our health to this Western medical system, right? We need to take control of this. And that's what I did. And that's what now I empower my patients to do through this new clinic system that doesn't take insurance, that has nothing to do with the Western medical system, but we still have doctors. And our doctors and our PAs and our medical staff, they empower people to reverse chronic disease. And the side effect of reversing chronic disease is you feel incredible. You want to wake up first thing in the morning and attack the day. You fall asleep in 5 minutes. You can't put on fat even if you try. Your brain is clear. Like, all of these incredible things happen when you reverse chronic disease and you actually optimize your health. It's the same thing, right? And that's why I created Next Health. And it took us a little while. Like, people did not understand what we were doing. But now that people get it, like, we're in a rocket ship. We're opening 30 clinics in the next 2 years. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun.
That's absolutely amazing. Obviously, the journey being your own journey, a very personal journey that led you down this path. And then for you to go out and say, okay, well, now I need to teach everybody else what this is. That's wonderful. I remember the last time I was at Next Health, which was when we recorded the podcast, I saw the wheel of all of these different aspects. There's, I believe, 12 aspects of what longevity and what true health stand for. And how did you come up with that wheel? And give us some insight into what those 12 aspects are.
Yeah, thank you, Navas, for that question. It was really from me trying to explain to my patients how to put all the different things that I was doing into their life in an organized way that can be understood. Okay, so as we know, in medicine, there are these branch out fields, right? There's one called functional medicine. There's one called preventative medicine. There's one called lifestyle medicine. And really, all of this needs to be part of an entire health program, right? So what I did was I said, okay, what are the major categories of my health that I'm focusing on? And in what order can I have the most impact, right? Because I'm a big believer in the Pareto principle, which is you put 20% of the effort forth to get to 80% of the result to create sustainable change. And so I start off with lifestyle medicine. So that's the first aspect of the wheel. And there's three wedges to that wheel, which is nutrition and metabolic health, movement and exercise, and sleep and recovery. So those are three aspects of what I call lifestyle medicine. Once you have those figured out in your own routine and your mindset, then you can move on to the other aspects. And I say that because without that foundation, it's really hard to make a difference in every other aspect of the wheel. The second aspect of the wheel is what I call preventative medicine, because once you get the nutrition, the exercise, and the sleep and recovery right, we can now talk about how do we prevent and reverse chronic disease. So that is brain health. It is cardiovascular health, which deals with things like hypertension and cholesterol, et cetera, and immune system health. And your immune system is your hedge against cancer, right? You have to have a healthy immune system so you don't develop cancer and you don't get infections, of course. And immunosenescence is one of the major factors, I think the major factor in what decreases our lifespan. And we'll talk about that later. Okay, so then once you get that in order, then I move on to the next aspect of the wheel, which is functional medicine or root cause medicine. That's hormonal health, detoxifying your life, gut health, and emotional well-being and stress management. Okay. And then once all that is addressed, we have a 12-month program with our patients. So, it takes 10 months to get to the point of longevity medicine. And so now we can talk about the peptides which I'm using throughout the entire program anyway, but now we can really put that last 80% in that moves the needle 20%. You see what I'm saying? Where we can now start talking about some of the advanced things that are going on in the longevity space to further extend your health span and maybe even add years to your life in your lifespan. So that's the wellness wheel.
In many ways, that wellness wheel sort of mirrors the 12 hallmarks of aging, which, include things like everything from mitochondrial dysfunction and dysbiosis and, immune dysregulation, et cetera. All of those things are mapping into those 12 pieces. And I like the way you have the hierarchy of, fixing the fundamental three things, which is, sleep, exercise, and diet as your foundational pieces. And then you can sort of build your house on top of it. I like the structure. I like the structure a lot.
JP, it's so interesting you say that because, when I talk about the hallmarks of aging, which is also like, if you look up the article in Cell magazine, it is a wheel, right? They show a wheel, right? But the minute you start saying mitochondrial health and DNA damage and all these things to patients, they're just like, what? I don't know what you're talking about. And so I created this separate structure so I can really, it's really about getting patients to understand what health is. And I wanted to keep it as simple as possible and give it a structure. So you're absolutely right, JP. But the hallmarks of aging are interwoven throughout the entire process because if you don't address the hallmarks, you're never going to get to a state of optimal health and reversing all chronic disease because they all stem from the hallmarks of aging at a cellular level.
I think, one of the things I think we'll get to in this call, and it's a big thing that I'm writing about right now and going to be presenting, is that there's a master control switch, if you will, for all of those aspects of aging. Turns out to be the autonomic nervous system. I actually think of it as there's four pillars that hold up all of health and all of life. The first is your immune system, because your immune system actually literally builds you, maintains you, and ultimately degenerates you. The second is your internal energy, which is your mitochondrial function, et cetera. And then the third is how you interact with the environment, which really the closest environment around you is your microbiome. So it's all the microbiomes, not just in your gut, it's in your airways, it's in your skin, it's everywhere. How you are interfacing, your tolerance, if you will, of that. And the last piece is your autonomic nervous system, which is coordinating everything. And if that's in dysregulation and in a dysregulated state, nothing is going to work. You're going to age more quickly. Everything's going to sort of go out of homeostasis and into into chaos. And when you want to bring it back, you need to get back into a parasympathetic state. So
yeah, that's a beautiful structure, JP. I love that. I think you hit the nail on the head there with that mindset, because it does kind of completely encapsulate the four major focuses of anti-aging and longevity, for sure.
Yeah.
You mentioned something earlier. I'd love to kind of go back to it. You mentioned when you were with your patients, trying to explain to them what health really is. And this was a big part of my journey. And I've gone deeper down into the etymology of the word health, where it kind of came from. But I would love to hear what you believe in your explanatory manner of what is health to all of us. What does it mean to be healthy?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, I actually think, we have these words like health span and lifespan, and they mean different things to different people, right? For example, me, I love to travel and I love hiking and I love reading and learning new things. So if I'm 90 years old and I can do those three things, to me, I've maintained optimal health, right? Without having chronic diseases to deal with and being on a bunch of pills. For other people, maybe it's mountain climbing. Maybe they just want to climb mountains and do crossword puzzles. And for them, that's optimal health. And so health is really a personalized view of how you see the world, in my opinion. And it's really about thinking. I have my patients do this exercise every single time. I say, think back to the time where you felt the healthiest, right? What were you doing? What were your goals for the day? What were your goals for the week? What were your goals for the year? And think back of how you felt in your brain. Think back of how you felt completely in your body and how that your brain and your body were interacting with each other. And that has a lot to do with the autonomic nervous system. And it's so sad because a lot of people, unfortunately, now can't even remember when that time was in their life. But, I think a lot of people our age, like, I'm using the three of us on this call here, for most of us, it was in our 20s. Sadly, I think even 20s now, there's a lot of patients I'm seeing that are not in a good state of health. And that's really sad. But for me, it was in my 20s. And to me, that is health. When you feel incredible, when you can't get sick even if you tried, when you're doing crazy things just because your body can probably handle it, like trying new things like skiing or jumping off a wall or something, like things that are, you remember your 20s, like we all did crazy things back then, right? And you were just ready to attack every single day, whether it was, to go out there and make a career, find a girlfriend, whatever it was, you were like ready to attack every day. That's a state of optimal health. And that's what we want to maintain for as long as possible, right? And so it's a long answer to your question, but it really deserves a little bit more explanation.
No, I love that because it comes down to capability to live the life that you truly desire, right? Where you feel unlimited in what possibilities exist, and your physical, mental, emotional capacity is just there, knowing that you're going to bounce back. Even if you may not physically or emotionally bounce back, you believe that you can. And that is a great way to kind of explain it to patients. I love that.
I think that bounce back piece is really important. It's the resilience. We talk a lot about the fact that, and I say this to everybody I talk with about stress. The world is not going to get less stressful. Your life is not going to get less stressful. What you are able to do is become more resilient to that stress, to be able to tolerate it better. And it's that to me is the message to the world today. It's not going to get easier. It's only going to get better if you can handle it better. And that happens internally. That gets your systems healthier when your diet is right, when you're exercising every day, when you're sleeping properly, when you're taking the time out to get back to that parasympathetic recovery state on a regular basis. Touching home is basically what, say you want to go back and touch home every hour or so. Just take a deep breath, relax just for 30 seconds. It's enough to restore you so that you can handle the next hour. And we say it to each other. We say it to each other. We say, take a deep breath when somebody's stressed. We tell somebody to take a walk. In our language, we're giving people the cues to do the things that they need to get into that parasympathetic state.
Yeah. And can I just add something to that, JP? I think, talking to my patients, I feel like when I talk about recovery, managing stress, getting back to like you said, where you feel that you are resilience, a lot of people think that that's a psychological only state, right? A state of being de-stressed. That's all in their psyche. And in reality, if people really understood, then yes, a lot of it is in your psyche, but a lot of it also rests in your physiology, in how you're treating your physiology and the connection between your physiology and your mentality around it. You're so much more empowered, because I think a lot of people, they don't give themselves the leeway to understand that this is not just in their head. There's a lot that they can do to become more resilient and bounce back. And what you're doing for your physiology through things like, like you said, breathing. Breathing is not just taking a psychological break from whatever's stressing you. It is actually creating a physiological change in your body. That right?
It's changing your brain. It's literally changing your brain. There's nervous connections between your lungs. I mean, the stretch receptors in your lungs come up through your autonomic nervous system into your brainstem, change neurotransmitter levels, change firing patterns, change how the immune system is functioning in your brain. I mean, this Western idea of the brain body dichotomy, which the Eastern philosophy doesn't really have. The brain is just part of your body. I mean, if you have inflammation in your gut and you have epilepsy, you're more likely to have a seizure. We get headaches when we have physical ailments. When our bodies are tired, our brains stop functioning properly. So there's no difference between those two things. It's just another organ in your body. It just does the thinking. So as a result, to me, it's got to be sort of that aha moment for people to say, what's happening in my mood, what's happening in my interpersonal relationships, of course that has something to do with my body, because my immune system cannot tell the difference between a physical stress and an emotional stress. It's simply a threat. It's a threat, and it responds to threats. So if you're spending all of your time stressed, your cytokine levels are going to go up. We know that social stress will activate inflammatory bowel disease. So, that connection sort of has that dichotomy has to be broken down, and people have to see it's all connected.
Yeah, exactly. I think you're hitting on some important points there, is the methods at which, at a physiological level, that they are connected. They're connected through hormonal signals, cytokines. They're connected through actual neuronal connections. There's so many levels of connections. The vagus nerve, which we'll talk about, it's a massive amount of connecting that goes on between the brain and almost every organ in our body. There's also the immune system connection. Our immune system actually, and these are cells in our bloodstream that are connecting all the signals happening above, our blood-brain barrier and the rest of our body. And so there's a massive level of connection, and you can't separate the two.
You mentioned empowerment and having patients kind of take on a particular role, I think, with their health once they're empowered to do so. And I feel like I've heard you mention this before, but you, I believe, want patients to become the CEO of their own health. What does that mean when somebody comes into Next Health or comes into your office? What does it mean to give them that reign, give them that label, and say, you now are the CEO of your health?
Yeah, that's such a great point. So one of the aspects that we talked about a little bit earlier is we've outsourced our health to the Western medical system, right? So many of us, and I'm surprised still at the number of patients I see that say this. I see my primary care doctor once a year. And for women, it's even worse, as I see my OBGYN once a year, and they tell me I'm healthy. And so I believe them, right? And this is a complete outsourcing of your health to people that are, number one, not incentivized to really take a deep dive, right? They have 15 minutes to get paid $30, that's it, right? Secondly, they don't have the knowledge to understand what is going to keep you healthy. They're incredible experts at diagnosing disease. The health part of that is lacking in most health practitioners' knowledge. And I don't want to offend anyone by saying that, because that was actually me for 25 years, So it was something that I recognized in myself. And so I feel that if everyone got this power back, they would automatically achieve states of health that they never knew was even possible, right? And so once you take control of your health destiny, you have the power to make daily, minute by minute changes that you completely lost outsourcing it to a once a year doctor appointment. And what I mean by that is when you're the CEO of a company, you're looking at numbers constantly, right? You're probably looking at your revenue every day, maybe even minute to minute sometimes. You're looking at your losses. You're looking at your expenses. You're looking at the resources that you have available to you to achieve a goal. And these are all numbers that you look at on a daily basis, right? Because you quantify it. What's even more amazing about our health is not only do we have numbers, but we have our feeling and our symptoms as well. And so you have a lot of data that you kind of ignore, right? So becoming the CEO of your health means getting control of that data again, understanding what the data is, what it means, and how you can change it. Okay. And so the data inputs are number one, how you feel. The key realization there is that that data is very lagging. It's going to take a long time before you feel bad when actually changes are happening internally because, we're very resilient biological beings. So what's the data that is more timely? And that is three things. Number one is your blood biomarkers. Okay. So understanding a few key blood markers and why they're important and what is the optimal range for them. Secondly, it's wearable data. We're so lucky to live in this age where we have incredible wearables that give us great directionality, right? Like the ring on your minute by minute, day to day data. And thirdly is imaging data. And so you can get images now through various x-rays or CT scans or MRIs that can give you much more data than you ever had before because all of this technology was locked up in the Western medical system and it's finally coming out. And those are the three categories of data that I feel everyone needs to be empowered with just a few numbers. Obviously, you can get overwhelmed with the data, and some people get data stress. And so everyone has to pick the level of data that they want to see. But the worst thing that you can do is not look at any of it, right? Because if you're not looking at any of it, then you are headed towards a train wreck and you don't even know it, right? It's like driving with blinders on. You don't want to do that, right? And so that's where we kind of stair step people in based on their level of tolerance of data inputs and how to make changes in that data. And that's why we really believe it takes a while and you have to deal with different people differently. And we individualize programs for people to look at this data.
It's very much meet people where they're at and work with them to create this opportunity. I think wearable health data is so powerful and really one of the most empowering things that I've personally utilized. I showed my Oura Ring earlier. I've got 6 years of data on this guy now, which is amazing. But, my wife uses her Apple Watch. I have friends that have Whoop bands and patients and clients that are utilizing these tools. What are some of the top wearable health data points that you have your patients become aware of? Because we know that we are inherently terrible at estimating calories in, calories out, steps taken, hours slept. We're notoriously bad at estimating. And I think this is where wearable data comes in. So what are some of the top data points that you like from wearable data?
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned that we're so bad at estimating because, a lot of people, we estimate our state of health and we think that we're doing pretty good. And in reality, we're completely self-misinformed on how good we're doing, right? And so it's so key to have some of this data. So I also wear an Oura Ring. I think for me, it's the most comfortable one to wear. Other people love their Whoop bands or their Fitbits. I mean, they're all great. I think people get hung up a lot on like the accuracy of it. It's really the directionality that really you want to be following more than anything. Okay. So I would say for me, it is on the wearables, it is your activity level, your sleep, obviously, and your HRV or your recovery levels. Okay. Those are my three big pieces of wearable from like one of these devices. And I'm a big believer that everyone should wear a continuous glucose monitor for at least 4 weeks at some point in their life, at least 4 weeks. I wear it for 4 to 6 weeks every single year, but my first journey with a continuous glucose monitor was 6 months. it took me to figure out how to get my, glucose curve under control.
Follow those ketones as well.
Yeah, I love ketones, JP. I cannot wait till these patches that you wear in your arm for a CGM have lactate, ketone, all of these markers. And this coming, we're going to have incredible data. I'm so excited about it. But yeah, I mean, those are the wearable data that I really like. I also encourage everyone to buy a bioimpedance scale so they can get their muscle mass and their fat mass, and then a blood pressure cuff, a standard blood pressure cuff. Most of us, even at younger ages, but definitely after 35, need to be measuring this at home once a month. It is one of the most underdiagnosed causes of contribution to mortality that people don't get treated for years and years, and is silently causing damage to every organ in your body. So that's my kind of basic suite right there. Bioimpedance scale, CGM, and wearable.
Love those.
And a lot of these metrics that you're talking about, because, as a scientist, how are you really going to know what to change and how to change it if you don't know where you're at to begin with? You have to measure. So I'm 100% believer in what you're saying. The other piece of it, though, is that what are the normal normal ranges for things have shifted as the country or as the world has become more and more unhealthy. As we've now heard about in the news, the level of chronic disease in the country is now something like 75% of people are not metabolically healthy. So if you're looking at what the right metabolic numbers are, and I put right in air quotes, it can't be the normal range, because the normal range is now not healthy. So it really has to be sort of reimagined, and you have to really, I think to a certain extent, find for yourself when you feel the best and when you feel healthiest. Those numbers might be more important to you than whether or not your cholesterol is sitting at 160 versus 230, because, well, maybe cholesterol levels of 160 aren't so healthy compared with being at 230. Maybe your blood pressure, is actually too low when it's at, 110 over, 65. So, and maybe for somebody else it isn't. So you just have to make certain that your numbers match to you. And the one thing I didn't hear you mention, but I'm sure you use it, are DNA measures. Things where people can get their own alleles measured to know whether or not they have a predisposition towards one or another metric being off, or how they need to be conscious about what they eat or conscious about what they're doing about their sleep. I mean, there's all sorts of different things that those DNA tests can teach you.
Yes, JP, you're absolutely right. And so to your first point, one of the things that I definitely educate my patients on is this whole concept of N of one. Like, you are your own experiment. And I don't care what the data says about what the normal level is. It's all given to us on a bell-shaped curve where they tell us who's in the middle of the bell-shaped curve, and that's what's considered normal now. And to your point, this bell-shaped curve keeps moving more towards disease as 90+% of us are metabolically unhealthy, right? And so we can't look at that. We have to look at what are we doing and moving things in the right direction. And so the best study that can be done out of every study, better than a meta-analysis randomized controlled trial, is an N of one study on yourself with your own data that you're doing every single day, testing interventions and seeing how they affect you, right? And so I'm a big believer in that. Now, secondly, on your point on DNA data, so we do a full DNA panel on all of our patients. I consider this more advanced because one of the things I've noticed with looking at DNA alleles is a lot of people get into the mindset that if they have an allele for something, that's their destiny, not a tendency, right? And so you really want to make sure that they've got the basics down first, that they're moving their wearable real-time data in the right direction. And then we tie in certain alleles to modify the program and know where we put an emphasis into the program. So, for example, you guys are very familiar with alleles for MTHFR or ApoE, right? The last thing I want to do is tell someone that they have an ApoE genetic tendency towards Alzheimer's, and then they just give up on any type of brain health type of exercise, right? And so we tell them that you got to get all of your real-time data in order first, and then let's tie in the DNA. But it is a very important part of the program.
And what about epigenetics? I find it fascinating how the cell control which proteins get made and which ones don't. But do you use like an epigenetic clock? Are you using some way of measuring their biological age and their pace of aging?
Yes, absolutely. So, epigenetics for your listeners is turning on and off genes. And that's what we're talking about, JP, is that your DNA alleles are not your destiny. It depends on whether they're turned on or off. And the way our biology has been wired since the beginning of when we crawled out of the primordial soup was genes get turned on and off through one method is methylation. And methylation means applying a certain chemical group to genes. And so we have full control second by second of what our exposures are, our stress levels, our diet, all on turning genes on and off. And so it's an incredibly complex system, but just knowing that it tells you that your genes are not your destiny. I have patients that have ApoE4 positive, two alleles that have incredible mental health, better cognition testing results than people that don't for the same age group. And it's because of the way they live their lifestyle. And so to your point, I think methylation is this emerging branch of science that we need to do a lot more research on. One of the coolest things about methylation now is through statistical analysis and the deep learning and AI, we can now see how are the methylation patterns of healthy people versus not healthy people. How can this predict our age and give us a biological age in air quotes? And also you can do this now organ specific as well and disease specific, which is really cool. So I'm a advisor for a company called TrueAge, and we use a TrueAge test because they all these different statistical analyses of your methylation patterns, organ specific, disease specific, biological aging, etc. And it's really interesting data. I look at it more as another one of those directional indicators for me because I like to check it once a year in our patients, and I use the pace of aging as more of a here is the sum total of all of your habits and routines that you're putting into place, how they're affecting your biological age. I don't like to get people too hung up on the actual number, but more of like a directionality measure.
Yeah. True Diagnostics is
Yes.
a great company that I think you're referring to. We actually had Ryan Smith, one of the founders of the company, on the pod several months ago. But it was a fascinating one. We should get him back because they're constantly upgrading what they are capable of doing. And he was mentioning some of the things that were coming down the pike that you're talking about now, looking at individual organs, looking at individual protein pathways, and being able to give that sort of visibility into it. But you're mostly talking about DNA methylation, which is one of the epigenetic features, and it's probably the one we can measure right now the best. But I actually had the good fortune to be talking with some researchers who are developing histone modification measures as well, because that's another form of epigenetics that is very important for figuring out which genes are going to be expressed and which ones are being copied, et cetera. And so I think as these tools evolve, we're going to be able to see even more into how the DNA being managed and which genes get expressed and which ones don't, and how much and when is going to be a big part of how we manage our pace of aging, and in fact, maybe even reverse it. Because there are some things coming down the pike. We've talked about it a little bit on this podcast about partial reprogramming, which has the potential to literally reverse, at least at the cellular level, aging. So I don't know if we'll get to that in this conversation, but it's really interesting stuff.
Really interesting. Yes, I agree.
I'd love to learn a little bit about some of the technologies that you use at Next Health and some of the amazing kind of results you've seen pop up. I've been in the cryotherapy chamber, which is wonderful for anybody who has not tried it. It really wakes you up. I love that feeling of just feeling refreshed and re-energized getting into the cryotherapy chamber. But you also have a few other ones, and I'd love to kind of dig into each one. Hyperbaric oxygen, I believe, is a very popular one. Recently, therapeutic plasma exchange has popped up. You've got IV therapy, obviously, and like full functional medicine, deep testing, and some of the work that you do with other practitioners working with clients. Tell me about kind of what brought each one of those into the practice and some of the benefits you've seen from each of those.
Yeah, thank you for asking that. Yeah, so at Next Health, we have what's called the longevity circuit. And our belief is that the more you do things in the self-care realm and the more the habit you develop on focusing on doing things for your own health, the better it is for you long term, just for your even your mindset of health. And so we've created a circuit training basically with these longevity technologies. I found them all through my own personal discovery about what was helping me. Because I'm a big research guy, I have to find stuff that has studies behind it that back it, And so longevity circuit has 4 different pieces of equipment at this time. We're looking at a couple of others. One is a hyperbaric chamber that you mentioned. The hyperbaric chamber provides oxygen at higher levels of pressure. And when you hyperoxygenate your entire system, you can create more energy. It also causes a little bit of oxidative stress, which is like a resetter for our cells. The second one, you spend about 45 minutes in this chamber, and it's a really relaxed experience. We actually have meditation that we give to people, goggles that people can wear during it. So you get a 2-for-1. You meditate and you're in the chamber. Second is the sauna. So sauna has been proven in large studies to help you not just avoid cardiac disease, but also to reverse methylation signs of aging and decrease rates of Alzheimer's disease. So sauna, I'm a big believer, and I think there's more and more studies coming out showing how sauna can be very helpful. We have a cryotherapy chamber that you mentioned. This also can decrease inflammation, but also, like you said, it is kind of another one of those hormetic stresses that can make you just feel incredible once you get out. And lastly, we have an LED light bed. LED light is something, it's a 20,000 LED lights, looks like a tanning bed, but it's LED, not ultraviolet. And this provides a certain wavelength of light that releases nitric oxide from your blood vessels, which opens up your blood vessels, kind of like the opposite of high blood pressure. You get more blood flow. So that's our longevity circuit. That entire circuit takes about 2 hours. And man, you feel absolutely incredible after you're done. You're like, it just really is a massive reset. We tie that in a lot of times with IV therapy, giving people IV nutrients, MAD, glutathione. And then lastly, we have some more advanced therapeutics like plasma exchange. Plasma exchange is an FDA-approved technology that's been locked up in the hospital setting for emergency cases of autoimmune flare-ups or drug overdoses. And the reason it works is because it removes all the plasma. And this is where all of the inflammatory cytokines, autoimmune complexes, all the toxins live in our plasma. So in a 3-hour treatment, you can sit there and get kind of an oil change for your body where we remove the plasma that's filled with some of these negative aspects that our body is dealing with and replace it with fresh new albumin. And that's kind of one of the more advanced therapies that we're doing. We combine that with stem cell infusion, exosome infusion as well. That's a quick overview.
Yes, I love it. And obviously, these are a little bit more on that. They're less foundational, obviously, right? We're talking about these are therapeutic tools that can be used when you get in control of a lot of those foundational tools. So I love the tools. I love what you're doing there at Next Health. Let's start for people that maybe just walk into the door. And what are some of those basics, those foundational things? You mentioned earlier sleep and recovery, nutrition, dietary, metabolic health, and the last one that's escaping me, movement, I believe. Let's talk a little bit about what are some of the more common issues that you see when people come in initially to Next Health.
Yeah, for sure. So kind of the patient journey is when you first come into us, what we do is we draw some blood from you, and then we put you on that bioimpedance scale I told you about, and we get a few other tests done. We do like a grip strength. We do a few other tests so that we understand where you are, okay? And then once you're done doing those testings, then we put you through the longevity circuit so you actually can feel and see and experience some of these technologies. It takes about a week or two for us to get all the blood test results back, but then what we can do from there is we can find what's going on in your individual biology. Now, if you're already wearing a wearable, we'll look at your wearable data as well. If not, we'll help you kind of sort through the wearable market and have you pick one. Then using those biomarkers and all of this testing, what we find most commonly is some level of metabolic syndrome going on. Okay. Now, a lot of people don't know that they have metabolic syndrome going on. 90% of people in America have it. And I would say probably only 10 or 15% know that they have it. Okay. And so that's a stark reality for a lot of people. Another finding that we find along the metabolic syndrome pathway is a level of free fat mass that is not optimal for where they want to be. And we also find with that excess visceral fat. And that could be someone who is overweight or not overweight. We see a lot of people, the term is skinny fat, but basically non-obese visceral fat accumulation and poor metabolic health.
And we're talking about the difference between subcutaneous fat and visceral fat. I think that's worth spending 30 seconds on, because so many people, as you just said, skinny fat is very dangerous. Subcutaneous fat is not dangerous. That's actually quite beneficial, especially if you are in a cold environment frequently. That could be beige or brown fat, and that's really metabolically healthy. So we're talking about fat that's around your organs, not the stuff that's outside between the muscle and the skin. You're talking about stuff that's inside that core surrounding your organs. Very dangerous stuff.
Yes, and that's why it really takes some special imaging and special studies and special devices to understand that difference, because you're absolutely right. You can be completely healthy and have perhaps an increased level of subcutaneous fat. That is just a cosmetic concern, if maybe, but it's really that visceral fat, which is a dangerous fat that is inflammatory to your system. And so that's something that we're trying to parse together for people. We see a lot of people also, to further answer your question, with some level of cardiac risk, whether it be through high blood pressure, through abnormal cholesterol markers, through high levels of stress, etc. We see a lot of people with brain fog, and we do an assessment on a computer to see what their level of cognitive impairment is as well. And the last thing that we measure on everybody is urine toxins. And we are seeing massive amounts of toxic exposure as well. So, we live in the most toxic environment ever that humans have ever been exposed to. There's over 150,000 different chemicals that are pumped out into our environment every single day that are accumulating inside of us. And people don't realize. And this is, I think, another pillar of what's really causing so much negative health and chronic disease right now is our level of toxic exposure. And so, we try not to overwhelm people, but we start putting into place measures to decrease their toxic burden and to help detoxify them at the same time.
Yeah. We haven't talked about detoxification. What's your detox protocol? Because that's, there's liver detox, there's, all sorts of different ways of doing it, through kidneys, et cetera. What's your go-to top 3 ways to detox?
Yeah, for me, detoxification is very simple. It's a Pareto principle again. You need to spend most of your time, money, and resources on detoxifying your lifestyle, right? Decrease the exposure level. I don't care how much we detox you, in air quotes. If you're just constantly exposed to a moldy house or, bad air quality because you haven't changed the air filters in your home for years, you're never going to make any headway here, And so it's really about detoxifying your air, your water, your food, and the chemicals you put on your skin. So we have an educational process around that. Now, that being said, once you've done all that, we have technology to help detox you. Our main detoxifying organs are our liver and our kidneys. And so we actually do a liver scan on people now where we can see if you have any fibrosis going on in your liver. So that's kind of one of the end points of poor liver health, and having fatty liver comes before that. And so getting people's liver health optimized, reversing their fatty liver, reversing their liver fibrosis. We have a lot of different methods of doing that. Secondly, sauna is incredibly detoxifying as well. And so we really encourage people to use sauna at our facility. And if you can find it in your gym or find it in your find the resources, get in your home. Daily sauna use, I think, is going to become a necessity for people,
Well,
And then lastly, go ahead.
let me ask you about sauna just briefly, because I'm trying to understand, is it the activation of heat shock proteins that you're looking for, or is it simply the process of sweating and getting so like being in a sweat box? Which is more important, or are they both? Obviously, they're both important, but I tend to think that sweating, actually, as simple as it seems, is actually critically important. And that's why when I talk to people, I always say it's great to get out and walk. I'm all about that. But aerobic exercise that gets you beyond that, even zone 2 into zone 3, get yourself sweating. When I'm at the gym and I run 10 miles a day, I sweat profusely. So I feel like I'm detoxifying. Every time I'm on the treadmill, I'm detoxifying because I'm sweating profusely.
Yes. I think it's definitely a combination of both, JP. I think the heat shock proteins have incredible effects to our mitochondria, and mitochondrial health is what leads to overall cellular health. And so when you have good overall cellular health, you have more of an ability to detoxify. Secondly, I think that there's nitric oxide release when you're in a sauna as well. And so I think that's incredibly helpful. And like you said, the sweating is a big part of it. We know that we can measure heavy metals in your sweat, but there's many other toxins coming out in your sweat. And so, yeah, it's lots of combined benefits with the sauna for sure. And then the plasma exchange that you mentioned earlier, Navaz, that's incredibly detoxifying because we're completely removing your plasma with all the toxins that live in it. And so we're seeing 20, 30% reductions in toxin levels every treatment. And so it's a really good reset for sure.
How often do you suggest that somebody go through that plasma exchange process? Because that's, I'm thinking about it from the dialysis standpoint, and people who have to do dialysis are going through something not identical, but similar. And that can be very draining. When you're doing that every 3 days, you need 24 hours to recover from it. So
Yeah.
how often do you suggest people do it?
It's different depending on if you're treating something versus you're doing it for overall longevity and health optimization. Overall longevity health optimization quarterly would probably be sufficient. Some people are more aggressive. They like to do it once every 6 weeks. However, we have people that come in with mold toxicity, post-COVID, long COVID, that are really suffering, and so then we're doing it on a once a week basis for these people. We're trying to fit in 6 treatments. A lot of the research around 6 treatments shows to be this is where you move the needle the most. And we try to fit that in the smallest amount of time period as possible. Just like dialysis, JP, like if you do it every 2 or 3 days, it's very draining. But what I found is once a week is generally well tolerated and probably the optimal frequency for people that are going after something.
Excellent. Interesting. I'm going to get back to something really right at the beginning you mentioned, and you talked about the fact that Western medicine is really designed to deal with acute problems well. Things like a broken bone, a trauma, and you mentioned in that list of things that it's really excellent for cancer. And I'd like to dig down one level deeper on that, because in my estimation, cancer is actually not something that is an acute problem. Yes, if it can be surgically removed, that's a great option. But most cancers aren't so simply just dissected out and go about your day or go about your life. And the reasons why people get cancer, to me, that's where the money needs to be spent. Because if you look at BMI, cancer scales with BMI, the more overweight, the more metabolically out of shape you are, the more likely you are to have cancer, the earlier in your life you are to get the cancer, and the more likely you are to have a negative outcome from having that cancer and be less responsive to therapy. But it seemed we had Thomas Seyfried on the show, and he's a big believer in getting away from the somatic mutation theory of cancer and more towards the metabolic theory of cancer. And I just wanted, I know we're getting to sort of the end of the hour. I wanted to just pick your brain a little bit on where you and how you advise people to, in a cancer prevention, mindset?
I love this question. So, JP, you're absolutely right. So, when you actually develop cancer, that is the end stage of a chronic disease that's been going on for a long time. It's like plaque buildup leading to a heart attack, right? Heart attack, you got to go to a hospital. You got to get treated for your heart attack, right? But there's 20 to 30 years of damage happening before that. Cancer is very similar. You have 20 to 30 years of damage going on in your immune system and your metabolic health that is leading to this cancer diagnosis. Now, I always say cancer's biggest enemy is being diagnosed as stage one, right? And so the number one thing that you can do to not suffer the end stage of cancer is be extremely proactive in the diagnostics around cancer. So get your colonoscopy done. We know that colon cancer is happening at a younger and younger age right now. Even kids are getting colon cancer. There's a lot of incredible testing coming out where you can actually find colon cancer genetic markers in your stool. And so there's going to be a point in time where, our toilet bowls will be able to tell us, like, you need to go see a doctor for potential colon cancer. If you're a woman, you got to see your OBGYN every year that you're alive forever. It's like, should be baseline. Men should be doing testicular self-exams and getting their PSA level measured at the appropriate frequency. Now we have more advanced tools available that are becoming cheaper and cheaper. Things like full body MRI, genetic screening like liquid biopsies that are getting more sophisticated over time. So really have an incredible cancer diagnostic program that will get you the diagnosis at stage one or stage two versus stage three or stage four, where we're talking 5-year survival rates. Stage one is almost always curable. Stage three, stage four, we're talking 5-year survival rates, right? Okay, so that being said, obviously, you want to be able to prevent cancer. And the key there is immune and metabolic optimization. If you're metabolically healthy and your immune system is healthy, there's a very low chance that you're going to get a cancer, even if you have the genetic predisposition for certain cancers. And so, it goes all the way back to all the basics that we were talking about, right? we get right back to making sure you're sleeping well, making sure you're metabolically healthy, eating a well-rounded, non-processed food diet, and managing your stress levels, managing your recovery, and moving your body. That goes right back to that.
Yeah, I think it actually makes sense. I'm not sure people would do this, but I think it's fair to look at a person who is metabolically unhealthy, who has an excessive BMI, whose blood sugar levels are off the charts, and look at them and say, you are not only suffering with metabolic syndrome, but you are at stage 0 cancer, okay? And you are early stage Alzheimer's. You are in the early stages because we can call Alzheimer's at this point type 3 diabetes. And I'm not certain that cancer isn't a form of type 3 diabetes. Neurodegeneration and cancer are, if nothing else, massively exacerbated, if not fundamentally caused by metabolic dysfunction. And so letting people know that it is worse for you to be at a BMI of 30 plus than it probably is for a person who's at 23 to smoke a pack of cigarettes. It's just that much more dangerous.
Absolutely, JP. That's a really good way to put it. Stage 0 cancer and early Alzheimer's. If that doesn't get people moving, I don't know what will.
Yeah, you're setting yourself up for disaster.
I'd love to wrap our wonderful conversation up with a nice little bow here. And I have a question for you because I think you're positioned in a very unique way to answer this. And in terms of what the future of human health looks like, what do you see being how we can utilize tools like machine learning, AI, and how we can, as humans, take control of and utilize this data to help optimize our own health? What do you see happening over the next 5, 10, 15 years with regards to optimizing human health?
Yes, fantastic question. I'm extremely bullish on how much we're going to completely reverse this health tragedy that we're in right now as a country, because I feel like this is a perfect situation for AI to hop in and give us some assistance here. Okay, so JP, you talked about histone analysis, DNA methylation. There's all sorts of measures you can get called proteomics and metabolomics, and is way beyond blood biomarkers now, right? And we also had a conversation around N of one, knowing what's going on in your particular biology and how to move it in the right needle. So move it in the right direction, right? And so I think where AI fits into this puzzle is getting all of those inputs, understanding how it's affecting your physiology, and giving minute by minute, day by day recommendations of things that you should be doing and looking out for, and catching a problem with multiple inputs way before we'd ever be able to, And so I think that there's a perfect intersection that's going to happen on I'm holding up my cell phone, our device is going to be our personalized AI doctor in our pocket everywhere we go, taking all these inputs in, dissecting the knowledge and giving us feedback real time. And that's only a couple years away. It's not too far away. So, the key is stay alive and take care of yourself right now, because it's going to be a whole new world out there in the next 4 to 5 years.
Yeah. As Ray Kurzweil says, live long enough to live forever.
Mm-hmm.
Keep yourself healthy now, because what's coming in the future is even more amazing.
Yeah, I agree.
Amazing. I love this conversation. I took a lot away from it, and it really just reiterates that you're doing some amazing work at Next Health. And if anybody's gotten to this point in the podcast and they want to follow you, where can they learn more about you? Where can they learn more about Next Health? And just kind of keep in touch.
Yeah, for sure. I'm on social media and all the channels at Darshan Shah MD. My website is drshaw.com. And if you sign up for my newsletter there, I send tips every week. And the Next Health, if you are in LA or in New York right now, and also Hawaii, we also have locations now in Nashville and Miami and all over the country opening. Go to next.health, www.next.health, and you can find our website.
Amazing. Dr. Shah, wonderful conversation, wonderful insights. Thank you so much for joining us, for being here. For anybody who got to this point in the podcast, please share this episode with one person who you think could utilize this information to upgrade their health. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll catch you all on the next one.
Thank you for having me. It was such an honor to be on your podcast. Thank you.